Well, it got me all mushy. Yeah, I appreciate it, Kenny. I'm Landon. I'm an alcoholic addict. So, man, there's a lot of people. I'm super nervous. I'm sweaty. But we'll just get into it. So I was born in Lubbock, Texas, 33 years ago, 1989. Man, I grew up with some loving parents. They divorced whenever I was young. I was 3. They divorced, and they tried to co-parent, but there wasn't much communication between them, and I got put in the middle on some things, and learned to manipulate at an early age, and I would carry that on for most of my life up until now, and it still comes back from time to time. But anyway, grade school was good. I was a good student. I think I first got introduced to alcohol and drugs around the 8th grade. And I remember the first time that I drank alcohol, it was alcoholically. I was drinking to get drunk. Like, the goal was to get messed up. And that's what me and my friends were all about. So that was the goal. And before I had found those friends, it had been kind of a struggle for me throughout my early years to find kind of where I fit in. I kind of always felt out of place. Something within my soul didn't feel right. And that's what the book refers as the spiritual malady. I had something wrong. I had a problem with my spirit, and I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And so when I found some men and women that were, doing the things that my parents told me not to do, I was attracted to that for whatever reason. And once I put those chemicals and those things in my body, I felt different. I felt a part. It was easier for me to associate and be around people. It was a social lubricant for me. And so that was my, drugs and alcohol were a solution to the way I felt inside for a long time. This is weird. Okay, I'm just going to talk out here. All right. So anyway, they were my solution for a long time, and so I used that solution for roughly 15 years, and we'll fast forward a little bit. I get through grade school. I get through high school. I'm actively using all throughout junior high school, hanging out with some wrong people, getting into some things I shouldn't be getting into. And I graduate high school. I was a pretty good student. Didn't really have any grade issues or anything like that. I just happened to be under the influence all the time. So I graduate high school. I go to college. During that time, the girl that I was dating gets pregnant, and we have a daughter. She's right there. Hey. We have a daughter, and at that time, man, I in order to cope with being a new parent, man, I really dove into more drug use and more alcohol. And that was my only coping skill. It had been my solution all the way throughout high school and junior high. And so that's what I turned to whenever life hit me. Of course, my daughter's mom, she wasn't okay with me continuing down that same path, having a daughter in the picture as well. And so she broke things off. We went our own separate ways, and then it got real dark. I had lost everything that I had built over that 7-8 year period. My life has been a series of rebuilds followed by destruction, rebuild followed by destruction, and that's it's been a reoccurring theme throughout my entire life. I'm able to build some stuff up. And then I destroy it. I'm really good at the rebuild, but I'm better at the destruction. And so, we split up, and I start hanging out with some criminals, is what they were. I started being a part of the criminal life. hanging out with some gang members and stuff, and I start moving some drugs, and so that goes on for a while. And this is my first taste of like really how deep and how dark alcoholism and addiction can get. I for the first time since school, I'm hanging out around some violence. I'm hanging out around some people that don't really care about anybody's well-being. They're after money and drugs, and that was basically the extent of it. We shared one of those things in common. I wasn't too concerned about the money, but I wanted whatever drugs you had. So that's where I found myself. And, I hung around those people for a long time, and then I got to a point where I started using lots of pills. And there was one night I was driving home from a house party, and I had taken a bunch of pills, and I fell asleep at the wheel, and I crashed my vehicle. I drove off a drainage culvert and crashed my car into somebody's front yard, and I ended up breaking my back in that car wreck. So I didn't know my back was broken at the time, and I got out of the car. The police, of course, showed up. Fire truck showed up. I passed a sobriety test somehow. I guess it must have been just pure adrenaline, really. And then, of course, the police officer wants to search my car, so he did. He finds some paraphernalia in my door panel, and I go to jail that night. And this was my first taste with what my decision making, what the byproduct of my decision making was, and it was the first time I had encountered the law that says, hey, you're going to jail. You're probably going to stay there for a little bit, and I had to go sit in there. Now, mind you, I was asleep the whole time I was in there, and anyways, I bond out, go to the hospital, find out my back's broken. I get sent into immediate emergency surgery, and I wake up 3 days later. And during this time, too, I'm taking a bunch of pharmaceutical opiates. And so I go into the hospital, and my whole family's there when I wake up from surgery. And I remember, one of the first things I remember is hearing my family telling the doctor, hey, whatever you do, please don't give him any more drugs. Little did I know they had already seen my toxicology report, and they came in and they're like, "What happened?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I fell asleep at the wheel. I was all the way sober, and they just immediately were like, they laughed at me is essentially what happened, and so the doctor agreed with them that I probably shouldn't get any more drugs. And I'm in an immense amount of pain post-surgery, and I talked to the doctor myself, and I said, look, man, I'm in a lot of pain. I just had back surgery. You got to do something. And so he agrees, and he brings me a pain pump, right? And where you can press this little button every 7 minutes, and you get a little drip of morphine. And so, and this is how deep and dark it got for me. I remember laying in the hospital bed and thinking, this 0.1 milligrams of morphine ain't cutting it for me. So I found out I can pinch the hose, right, and I can save up 3 drops over a 21-minute period and drop all 3 of those at once. And that's what I did, and I stayed knocked out in that hospital bed for about 4 days. And that's how sick I was, man. I'm sitting there in the hospital from my decision making while under the influence, and I'm sitting there in the hospital getting high on their drugs with my family in the same room, and not a care in the world. Didn't care who I was hurting, didn't care what my family thought, what my daughter thought, didn't care about any of that. Moving forward, I get out of the hospital, go to my grandparents' house. they send me home with some mild painkillers, and that's not good enough. So immediately I get some street drugs delivered over to the house. And it never stopped, The only thing that stopped was my surgery. I was under getting operated on. It was the only time that I wasn't actively trying to find some drugs. And so after that, I continue on. I get put on probation for the paraphernalia they found in my car. Long story short, me and probation didn't work out. I wasn't trying to change. I kept using, failed some drug tests, was on the run for a little bit. They ended up catching up with me. I go back to jail. They wanted to reinstate my probation, and I told them, nope, probably not. I'll just go to state jail and do my time. And so that's what I did. I was in county for probably, 6 months, and did another 9 months in state jail at the Form B Wheeler unit in Plainview. And got out, and probably, I'd say a week or less, I was back at the same thing, and it didn't stop for another 3 years. I got back into the hardcore stuff. I ended up catching some more charges. I ended up catching some bigger charges this time. I caught 400 to 200 grams of methamphetamine. I caught 1 to 4 grams of heroin, and I had a pistol underneath my hood. And so I get arrested, and I'm immediately thinking this is 2 to 10 years for sure. I've got some priors, and there's a gun. There might even be the U.S. Marshal showing to pick me up. I don't know. So I go to jail. And I'm sitting in there. I'm like, I called my parents, called my grandparents, like, hey, I'm in jail again. Are you gonna get me out? And click, like, no. They had enough, and I remember sitting there like I'm in here for a long time, And all of a sudden, I get bonded out. Don't know who did it until I got outside the jail, and it was one of my friends that I was seeing at the time, and she came and bonded me out, and it's funny because if she hadn't have bonded me out, I don't think the next steps that happened could have or would have happened the way they did, because it was a total God thing. My mom had actually reached out to a guy named John Anchondo, and he's an interventionist. Well, I got out of jail, and his number and his name are in my phone. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I'm a little bit paranoid because I've been doing some meth and some heroin. I'm like, this guy's a Fed for sure. You know what I mean? Like, I don't trust this, but he was reaching out, and he wanted to help me. I didn't know my mom had reached out to him because me and her weren't talking at the time. And so, anyway, I talked to him back, and he ended up saying, hey, let's get you into treatment center in Houston if you're ready. And for whatever reason, I said, yeah, let's do it. I think the pain was great enough, and I had been through enough things to at least give recovery a try, So I went to a treatment center, and let me back up a little bit. I think this was, John being in my inbox at that time, I think this was the first time that a God, or my God of my own misunderstanding at this time, showed up in my life. I didn't understand who God was, what he was doing, how he had his hand on my life, all through the addiction, currently and in the future. I couldn't comprehend that. I hadn't taken the time to cultivate a relationship with God. And so this was the first time, though, that his providence directed me the right way. And all I had to do was say yes to John Anchondo. And so I did that, and I go to Houston. I get into some recovery over there. And, that was the first time I was introduced to recovery. First time I was introduced to some 12 steps. I was clean 18 months over there. And I stopped going to meetings, stopped talking to my sponsor. I stopped doing the things that we're supposed to do in this program. And And so I also met a girl from Lubbock at this time. She happened to have right around the same amount of clean time as me. I ended up moving her to Houston after we had some clean time. We were in a relationship. She decided that she wanted to go out and drink on her birthday after we both had some clean time. And at this point, both of us had grown apart from the recovery community. And so I agreed. We went out and had some drinks. It snowballed from there. We went the next weekend, had a couple more drinks. The next weekend, had a couple more drinks. The next weekend, she wanted to smoke some weed. The next weekend, there was some other drugs involved. And so, over a 6-week period, we had pretty much gone full-blown back into active addiction. And so I went after what I wanted, which was opiates at this time. I went back to the needle. And I got her introduced and started her on the needle. She was curious about what I was doing, and so I showed her. And we used together for a long time, and we became each other's God. We became each other's higher power. The only thing that mattered was my relationship with her, and the only thing that mattered was her relationship with me. Everything else fell in the background. There was no recovery. There was no God. There was no fellowship. We didn't have any friends. It was just us. And we stayed that way, miserable, really. She ended up getting very sick. And I remember, one night she was laying in bed and she had skipped work for the past couple of days, and she got up out of bed and she sat down on the toilet, and I was in the living room watching TV, and all of a sudden I hear water or liquid hitting the floor, and I go in there and she's sitting on top of the toilet seat peeing, and I'm like, "What are you doing? What's going on?" And she's like, "I'm just using the bathroom." I said, "Well, you're not using the bathroom. You're peeing all over the floor." And at that point, I knew something was terribly wrong, so I called an ambulance, and they came and picked her up. We went to the hospital, and it turns out she has an embolism in her brain, which means her brain's bleeding. And from there, they airlifted her to League City, which is a suburb of Houston. And come to find out, she has sepsis in her blood from using dirty needles. And it had moved to all of her organs. And, I remember her turning blue. Her extremities started turning blue. Her body was dying. It was decaying, like, before my eyes, her toes, her fingers, tips of her ears, and they started talking about amputation. And she was a hairdresser. And I think the prayer at that point became like, God, I don't know if she could recover from this. If you need to take her, then take her, and so unfortunately, that's what happened. She ended up dying. It'll be 3 years in December. I carried around a lot of guilt and shame behind that. And so I still carry some guilt. But it's a constant thing that I'm working through, and grief is weird. It comes and it goes. But moving forward from that, after her death, just another tidbit on how deep the addiction can go. She obviously had a celebration of life, and I had to go to that high because I was so deep in opiate addiction that if I hadn't had those drugs, I would have been sick and unable to attend the funeral. So I had to get high before I went to her funeral, and that's how sick this thing can get. So anyway, I get clean after this. I also have another relapse after that, and then I move here, and I meet Kenny. I meet this group. I start meeting a lot of men in recovery, and this was the first time that I was totally surrendered, and I was ready to let somebody else do the driving. It turns out God can do a whole lot more with my surrender than I can do under my own power.
That's right.
And so that's where I was at. That's what I had to do. but I also didn't know what that looked like, right? I had built a relationship with God in my first recovery go, but again, like I said, I turned my back on it. And so I knew the process, right? So I had that going for me. And, step one is all about honesty. I had to get real honest with myself. For 15 years, I had denied my disease, and denial was a large part of my story, and so I had to get honest that I had a problem. And it not only that, but it was a reoccurring problem. My relapses already proved that. My jail time had already proved that. And so, I had to get very, very honest. You know what? I forgot something. I'm going to back up. Earlier I said that I had caught those larger charges. When I went to rehab in Houston, I got out of the rehab in Houston 45 days later, and I called my lawyer, and come to find out they had dropped my 4 to 200 down to a 1 to 4 grams, my 1 to 4 down to a less than a gram charge, and they didn't charge me for the gun, and they gave me time served on everything, and I didn't have to serve any jail time. All because I got out of the way and went to treatment. All I had to do was agree to go to treatment, and then God did the rest. And then back to the current time, I pretty much feel like I spit in God's face at that time. He got me out of those charges, and I still relapsed. And so today, the goal is to not spit in his face anymore, right? He's shown me so much grace, so much love that I can't even fathom. There's a lot of stuff here, a lot of stuff that I've gotten here that I don't deserve, and I think the most simple definition for grace is an undeserved gift. And that's exactly what's been given to me. But, I had to work these steps thoroughly. I had to work them with somebody that had worked them with their sponsor. Step one's about honesty. Step two is, became willing to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. So that implies that I'm insane, which I was. And so, I knew that the power greater than me was there. My problem was I wasn't good at listening and obeying. I have a problem with disobedience and rebellion. And so not only is that through authority figures, jail, cops, parents, it's with God too. I can't sit up here and say that I always obey God. I don't. I struggle with that, actually. And that kind of brings me to step three, have I fully turned my will and my life over to God? And at first what that looked like is taking some suggestions from my sponsor, because I hadn't cultivated the personal relationship yet. All I knew is these men that were out here sponsoring me have a significant amount of sober/clean time in recovery. Whatever their power is working in their lives, I need me some of that. And thank God they took the time to show me what that looked like. And there was a time early in recovery where, one of the main words in step three is decision, right? And when I got faced with another decision, I'm like, well, shit, because historically speaking, I'm not good at making decisions, So when I get to step three, make a decision to turn it over, what I had to do was get out of the way and let my sponsor, let other men in recovery, give me suggestions on how to act and how to handle certain situations. Meanwhile, cultivating a relationship with God. And so I tried to cultivate that. And as things progressed, it was easier to hear the God voice. And it was very apparent that God was speaking through the recovery community and through my sponsor, and basically through everyone that's worked these steps. There's a power in these steps that I'm not entirely sure what it is. It's unfathomable for me, I think, but I'm a firm believer that everybody should work the 12 steps, not only addicts or alcoholics. But anyway, that's for another crowd, I guess. But so step 4, I get to step 4, and this go around, I remember thinking like, oh my God, I got to do this step again, and usually, I'm a 0 to 100 person. So like when I get to step 4, I'm going to overdo it. I'm going to be very thorough, and that's what I did. And thank God for Kenny and his patience, because there was a lot of stuff on that step 4. Step 5 is just simply a confession to another alcoholic or drug addict. And so I confessed everything and put down a lot of stuff on paper, and Kenny got to hear that. And then 6 is character defects, man. And I had a long list of those. My sponsor this go around, he wrote them down while I spoke my 5th step. And in the past, my other sponsor, he had me write them down. And so that was a game changer for me, because he picked up on some stuff that I was completely unaware of. And not only that, but it was brutally honest, And so I really enjoyed that step 6 this go around, because there was some character defects that I was unaware of. And I remember, step 7 is asking God to remove them. And this go around, it wasn't so much asking him to remove, or it was asking him to remove them, but it was also give me the awareness of when I'm acting out on these defects. Because I had been spiritually dead for 15 years. And so the way I acted and the way my character was normal at that point. There was no spirit in me there was no spirit in me of good character. I had built a character that was, not something to write to mom about, and so, moving forward, you get all these defects out on the table, and the thing about my defects is they're like mushrooms. They grow in the dark, right? And so I constantly have to shed light on them. Or really, I don't do much light shedding. That's more of a God thing, I think. But he's got to shed light on them, and I've got to actively participate in not acting out on them. And that comes further in the step work as well. And then 8, is make a list of people you're ready to make amends with, which I pulled from my 4th step. And then step 9 is made direct amends to those I've harmed. And the amends process for me is so much more than a sorry. I can't tell you how many how many times my mom has heard me say sorry. My words coming out of addiction were worth nothing. How many times have I said sorry and then turned back to the same old crap? How many times have I said sorry and there's been no behavior change? How many times have I said sorry and then burned the same bridges that I've burned in the past? So when I got to the amends process, I did say my sorries, but really what the family members were after and the people that I amended, they were after a change in behavior, and I will say this about the amends process. I've never had a bad amends. Nobody's told me to get the F out of their house. Nobody has showed me where the door is, They've all been very receptive, and I think that's a product of grace, And they're waiting on the changed behavior, And I think there's so much grace involved in that, man. And grace doesn't mean, it's not an excuse to sin again. It's not an excuse to still act out on my defects. There's a guy named Paul that wrote me a letter about 2,000 years ago, and he said, he wrote y'all the same letter, by the way. He said, should we keep sinning so that grace may abound? And he said, certainly not. And so that's been powerful for me because, I think, I get shown grace, right? And I automatically assume that the grace is going to cover me again in the future, so it gives me an excuse to act out again. I'm covered, right? And that's not how it works for me today. There's this living amends process where there's the change of behavior that has to be a constant. I have to be persistent. I have to have some consistency about my behavior. And then through time, through some patience from the family members and the people that I've made my amends to, they see the change, and it's my job to not screw it up again, because all I've done is screw it up. So, and then moving on to 10, 11, and 12, those are the daily maintenance steps for me. Step 10 is promptly admit when we're wrong. Well, I'm not very good at promptly admitting nothing. So I spend a lot of time in my nightly inventory, which is step 11. I'm in a group where we share our inventories at night with each other, and I get to reflect on my behavior during the day. Was I resentful? Was I selfish? Was I dishonest? Am I afraid of something? Was I of service today? How did I help some other people? If there's something I could correct, can I correct it? What am I grateful for? And so those things hold me accountable on a daily basis. And we send those out to each other. And then I usually pray about if I've noticed some behavior that needs to be corrected in those steps, then I pray for correction. I pray for guidance. And mainly I pray to be a vessel to somebody else today, which also brings me to step 12. Giving back, delivering the message that was given to me. Without these rooms of recovery, I don't know where I'd be. I don't deserve to be here. I'd probably be dead, honestly, if it wasn't for 12-step recovery and a God of my understanding. I think the sole purpose for me now today through this program is to be a servant of my God. I think the most selfish thing that I can do is go home and put my recovery, my salvation on a shelf and store it there and not share it with somebody else. I think that there's been so many unique opportunities that have arose since I decided to become a servant. The prayers in the past and the relationship with God in the past was a very selfish one. But now it's become very selfless. And when I got out of the way, it left room for grace. It left room for God to come into my soul and do what He does. Turns out He's a little bit better at running things than I am. That's it's on His resume to run things. That's His deal. He's the guy that runs the show. Now, I'm just a student. I'm just a vessel for whatever He's doing. But I also have to cultivate that. I have to. I've got to be aware of spiritual opportunities that He puts in my path. Whether it be a sponsee out at Journey, a coworker, customers at work. There's always a chance by showing up for the ordinary that you can be a part of something extraordinary. Just by being what's the word I'm looking for? Just by having a servant's heart, those opportunities appear a lot easier today than they used to in the past. And that's probably the single most thing that I'm most grateful for today is the opportunity to serve other alcoholics and other addicts that struggle with this thing, because somebody did it for me. And if I don't do it for somebody else, then what am I doing, and who's passing on the message? The harvest is ripe for the picking, and there's a lot of people out here that need some help, and it's our job to to help those people, the way that we were helped. It's I don't know, we're losing a fight with alcoholics and addicts, but it's a numbers game. The more we try to save, the more get added to the kingdom, so, and the ones that don't, at least some seeds were planted. We don't do the watering, or I don't do the watering, but for every seed I can plant, God can water. And so that's also in his resume. That's happens to be a gardener too, I guess. So, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it, man. I guess for the newcomer, man, if you're hesitant about this thing, if you're on the fence about diving into these 12 steps, I mean, like, what do you got to lose? For a lot of us, we tried everything else. For me, it ended up in jail, ended up with some broken relationships. I had tried every drug on the face of the planet. So why not try some 12-step recovery? And I'm so thankful I did, and it's removed a whole bunch of fear, and it's given me some blessings back. I'm not going to sit up here and brag, but I would like to show you the restorative power. So, since I've gotten sober this time, and I've been sober since July 19th of last year, all the things have come back. My daughter's here. That's my little son in her lap. My girlfriend Casey right there. My mom's back in my life. My dad's back in my life. I got a good job. My boss is here. And so, and just the support I have from everybody. It's a beautiful deal. And, I don't have any worries today, really. My fears have turned to small concerns. I can manage things today. The only thing unmanageable right now, maybe, is the laundry at the house. But other than that, I mean, we're doing all right, but anyways, yeah, I think that's all I got. Get a sponsor, do the 12 steps. Again, what do you got to lose, man? I'm forever grateful that I took the time to do some introspection, to look at myself, and figure out what kind of character I built over 15 years of drug use. And it wasn't pretty. It wasn't someone I liked. But the beautiful thing is, through the 12 steps of recovery, I got to meet a new me. There's a better character under that old one. But I had to scrape off the old to make room for the new. And it's an ever evolving thing, man. It's a daily practice for me. And I'm not good at it yet. But I'm getting there. And, the cool thing about it is I got tons of men I can call today when I'm struggling with something. I got several men I can call for advice, for guidance, for suggestions. And if they don't know, they know somebody that knows. If my sponsor don't know, his sponsor might know. If his sponsor doesn't know, then his sponsor might know. It's a hierarchy of recovery. And I'm going to find an answer somewhere. You know what I mean? And I just want nothing more than the same for all of y'all, And not only that, but we need some warriors on this side of the firing line. We need some guys in the trenches with us to go serve the message, to take the message into places that it's not always taken. There's people out there that need us, and come be a part of. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you, Landon. Let's give him another round of applause. Great. All right. Lose my place. Already gave out Chet's announcements. Wednesday's meeting is a newcomers meeting. Topics come from steps 1, 2, and 3. Please support this meeting. Bring a newcomer because
It's poppin'.
All right. Birthdays are celebrated the first Monday of every month for the previous month. If you're a member of this group or want to become a member and make this your home group, put your birthday on that birthday board. Get prepared. Birthday night's coming up. I might know a guy. John Austin will be our November speaker. So that ought to be a good one. And there's a contact list. If this is your home group, please add your name and email if you'd like your information to be available for new sponsees. If you want to carry the message journey and this is your home group, get with me or Emily. There's a sheet in here. Fill it out. Give it to one of us, and we'll get it approved. And you can get in there and be on the firing lines with us in the trenches. And did I miss anything else? Any other announcements? Good. And let's see. The assurance of anonymity is essential in our efforts to help other alcoholics who may wish to share our recovery process with